And we're live. Welcome everybody to FakeWhale. Today we have with us Iskra Velitchkova, also known as Point Line. I'm sure many of you follow her already on Twitter, so you're familiar with her as a unbelievable generative artist, honestly. But as I found out, much more than just that. And that's where I want to dive in with you, Iskra, is that your website is absolutely gorgeous. It's a weird place to start, but I rarely go to an artist website and really dig in or like really am interested. It's like a lot of times the social media pages of artists these days are more interesting in their own websites, but your website is gorgeous. And I spent quite a bit of time, and I'm gonna lead with this. You have this as a very concise statement at the beginning of your website, which is a great place to start, and I'll let you take it from there. But to quote you, life is not just about digital or physical. I don't think we should make technology more human. I believe we have to push technology forward to understand us better. Could you explain that?
Shortly. Well, yes. As I put on the website, I tried to make like a short overview of my experience so far. So to answer that question, I think it's important to go a bit time ago where I began my activity. I started in the data visualization field. I studied economics, and then somehow it felt like natural for me. It was like it's a long story, but at the end, I just found data visualization like a perfect match between my knowledge. You know, in economics, it's all about doing graphs and understanding data and so on. But I really needed to do something more creative. I felt it was not like my way to be a orthodox economist. You know, so yeah, I tried to get there. I created a studio with a partner, and then I moved to a big company here in Spain. So I did that activity for several years. And the second job was in a big bank here in Spain. And I was so lucky because I was in a team with a super talented scientist there. And I was so much in contact with them. And I was in charge, like, to create stories with our data and tell to our customers. And also, it was a really huge bank here in Spain. So we had also this kind of mission of disseminating what was data science to society, because you know the role of a bank is super important in society, how you deal with your money and so on. So I was so in touch with the algorithms that we were creating. It could sound like, yeah, it's a bank, but you know, there are many applications of what recommend you how to deal with different profiles of yourself and so on. So those questions somehow brought to me this kind of need to really dive more into algorithms and not just in the data, which was like something very concrete in some point about some kind of profile, you know. But the algorithms, how I was looking at these scientists, and I realized how, you know, all the society is being shaped by a very few amount of people who know what to do, but maybe not necessarily know why, because we need more knowledge to really understand how to shape this society. So I was so interested in these things. And then, you know, I just realized how powerful it was, this technology, to change the way I interact with you, how we communicate now so immediately, and instead of writing a letter, right, years ago. So everything changed here. So when we were building these systems, I think there is a trend in the technology now to do something more human with the machines, right? To make machines look like us or behave like us, and that's something interesting, of course. But I mean, we are enough people in the world. I think we maybe don't need more machines like us. So I think the purpose here is, you know, when you work with these AI technologies, machine learning techniques, you realize how everything actually is very simple. Everything is about to find new spaces where we understand better how we think. This is how we teach machines, actually. So if we go further in that direction, I think we can find something very interesting, and it's we really struggle with understand how we think and how we store our memories and how we relate to the person next to us, what is common with me and my partner and what is not, what is this connection actually means. And in a very poetic way, I thought, okay, maybe this kind of machine learning techniques of finding these new relationships and these new comparisons with me and other people and other places, and it's something very powerful for me. So I think these new technologies should be used maybe to expand ourselves and to actually understand better how we think. So that's why I try to always, when I start some project, I always start with this sentence for me in myself, like, what can the machine do for me? How can the machine help me? And when I design my things, it's always this thing. So what can I learn from the machine? And then I'll do my job. But this is the help that I think we are exposed now to.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it's a lot. That's loaded. I don't even know where to begin with that. First of all, I want to just ask, like, to put simply, I did see some of your work as a what did you call it? Data visual. What was it? Data visualization.
Data visualization. Yeah.
That's basically like infographics and such, right?
Yeah.
When you say graphic stuff. So it's basically just compiling data and then putting it in a visual format for people to understand. I saw some of yours though, and you got very complicated, detailed. You were very creative, it looked like, in the ways that you were visualizing this data. So I did see the connection, like, into your generative work almost between that and everything. So I just wanted to clarify if that's the kind of, graphs and stuff is kind of how that starts, but you were creating more like these webs and stuff, it looked like, which was crazy interesting. But to jump more towards the point here of making technology or not making technology more human, but pushing technology to understand us. Like, how do you push technology to understand us? Like you even said we don't even understand how we think. I like this idea of, like, having technology help us understand ourselves almost in ways, because I too, well, I shouldn't say too, because I don't know really your stance, but I am not seeing the emergence of a new life form really, or this new thing. I see it as a tool still very much. Like, when I interact with AI, I don't feel like I'm interacting with a being or something. It feels like a search engine. It doesn't feel like, another person is in conversation with me. I don't quite understand. I think it takes a lot of imagination from some of these generative artists to get to this point of, like, I'm collaborating with this artificial intelligence. Like, I don't see it. But I do love the idea of, like, using this as a tool to help us further ourselves. And I like the idea of, like, it doesn't need to be human. Like, let it be whatever it is. And, like, let's use it to make us better at what we are, type thing. But how do we do that? How do you know what I mean? Does that even make sense as a question? Like, how? Because it almost seems like we make technology like us in hopes of us understanding ourselves better, or almost as if we don't know how to do it any other way. Like, it's something like that. Like, well, we just have to copy ourselves. However we think is how we have to make that think, or however, a RAM relay system in our own brain works, our own computer brain works, is how it would work in a computer or something.
I think that's the question. I just put here the question. I don't have the answer, but connecting it to my generative work, I think that's way to explain how I try to focus my work on. It's starting by the first purpose I had when I quit my job and I decided to start completely with art. So in the beginning, I spent 1 year on gathering all the things that I learned from the previous years, trying to create like a strong project to start with the whole journey. And I decided to go to my deepest question in myself. I was born in Bulgaria, but I grew up in Spain. And that's something that it's not present in my daily life, but it's something very deep in myself, this kind of question of where I'm from. And I don't need an answer, but it's something that really resonates like somewhere here. And, it's like the two extremes of Europe, and the culture is super different between both countries and everything. And I have both in myself. So I was wondering, can I understand where I am in this distance? So I am closer to Bulgaria or to Spain or to the Balkans or to the Mediterranean culture or not. So with all these machine learning techniques that I tell in the beginning, it's all about finding spaces. And so it's about finding distances. So when I find some, I don't know, a song that I like in Spotify more than another one, it's because it's closer to me in a new kind of distance, not a physical one, but a new kind. If I find someone in Tinder, in the application, who I like, it's because it's closer to me somehow. So I said, maybe I can use this technique to gather a lot of data about the Balkan culture, the Mediterranean culture, my own memories, and then put it on a system, build like a network, and then find where I am in the process. So this was like my first idea of how to get there. So that's why I bought a plotter. I bought a potter wheel because I wanted to play with some kind of a very traditional Balkan shapes. And then I started creating generative art. And then at some point I said, okay, this is super complicated for me because I was so biased. I felt that because I was, okay, I can put here music or memories or photos or movies, but I had chosen this input. So I was so biased. So I realized that I lacked of perspective on this problem, let's say. So I said, okay, I'll just stop with that. I'll pause it. And then I'll go to some abstraction to maybe find a process to get back to this question. So it's a kind of complicated to explain that. But this was like my way of thinking. So when I moved to the whole abstraction, and my work is quite abstract now, it's because I said, okay, maybe I can find some kind of relationship with nature in my work, but how? So I started playing with very normal algorithms, like natural algorithms from physics, from, forces, fractal algorithms. And then I kind of started destroying that algorithm. So if you want to build a tree, it's quite easy. You have a branch, and then you have two branches, and then two, and it's beautiful, but it's quite easy, right? So if you start destroying that tree and rotate it and play crazy with thin lines and overlaps and colors, and you obtain something super different from a tree. And sometimes you obtain something organic and something super real, like a bird, something that I created. But I wasn't looking for a bird, but it so I said, okay, here is something, if you're playing like a kid, destroying everything, and at some point something emerged from there, super real, it felt like there is something here, there is a distance between my code and nature and things that you have around. You can also create a computer or a lamp. I'm not saying that everything has to be in nature, but you can create something that actually exists there. It's an illusion of, it's not like a very real, it's not a photograph, but it's something that reminds you something that you've seen around. So I said, okay, maybe technology is here to be used in this way, or at least this is one of the ways to use that. So because I think the ultimate question that we have is to understand who we are and what is this around. And science is helping to that, technology is helping to that. We know why, the plants are green, why we need water, how are the circles of water in earth. We know all this stuff, but we don't know why leaves have this shape, why we have this shape, why the sky is blue, why we don't have answers for these things. But when you're creating code and you're using generative techniques, which brings to you something that you are not expecting, that's something that just gives you the machine, something happens there, at some point, because when you obtain this kind of natural things, you can say, okay, if I created this bird And then I use the reverse process to understand how the code was written to get to the bird. I know this is very poetic, but I can understand how the bird is done, in a very free way to say that. But I can understand how a leaf is done. So I'm not sure if this is going somewhere, this way of...
No, it is.
But it's
I want to,
something...
yeah, sorry to interrupt, but you came upon this bird shape image through code meant to be making a tree. Is that right? Or
It was just by exploring the algorithm and how it would change with different...
okay. Well, I mean, you're touching on something that's super interesting, and I've observed in nature for a long time as well, and I'm sure so have you, and I think tons of people. I made a zine about it even a while back, but of how in nature we find all these repeating patterns from different natural processes. You find them within your own body, all the way to like when you're on a plane and you look down at a mountain, you see your bone veins running down the side of the mountain, stuff like what is this? And I've kind of spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I've thought at one point I came to a conclusion of like, it's called the path of least resistance or something, like it's finding these, what that algorithm is in nature, basically, like and it sounds like you're kind of thinking that way as well. And it's touching on the same thing that I've brought up with every generative artist so far that I've spoken to on FakeWhale, which has been like 3 or 4 now. But this idea of like generative art being the architecture of nature or something like that, of like some sort of like attempt at quantifying and mathematizing, like as people have been doing forever, but now bringing it into this new process where the computer actually, and the power of the computer can bring it further from just like, Aristotle or something, writing down numbers from looking at the sky. Now we have machines that are kind of doing that similar thing, and maybe we're going to be able to figure out why a leaf is shaped that way based on fractal geometry and stuff, and that same fractal whatever algorithm could also maybe produce a cow or something, like it's, is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, exactly. Because there is a difference between, and I do both things, but I really find more interesting the second one. You can try to replicate nature, which is super interesting because it's like a way to get closer to that and a way to express yourself, But there is another way, which is you're not trying to represent anything. You're just trying to explore how the code can work and how what can you display with that code. And then when something emerges from there, this is what really interests me, because it's like, why this came from here,
It sounds like evolution or something. It sounds like witnessing evolution, or like like, why is the bird shaped that way? Because evolution shaped it that way. It was like, those things, those traits that made that survive and prosper, basically allowed it to. So it was shaped by evolution, and evolution itself could be seen as a generative process, probably,
Yes,
if you
yes,
break it down.
yeah.
Yeah, so maybe within generative processes, the same evolution is happening where the stronger traits, condense and prosper or proliferate.
Exactly. Yeah. I think there is something there. Yeah.
It seems like it to me, It's also the most frustrating thing because I want to like make it material or make it more solid or be able to hold on to that idea more. But it's such a fleeting kind of, do you feel that as well? This fleeting kind of almost like ephemeral nature to it of maybe you don't, because you get to make art out of this same, you're basically making art out of this concept. So maybe these artifacts that you're creating out of it make it more tangible for you or more real. Is there anything with that? I mean, you bought the plotter, so there must be something about materialism or making it materialist that...
Well, actually, the plotter, I use the plotter a lot to understand the process, because as I said before, sometimes I just try to destroy everything that I have because the most interesting things emerge from there. But then at the end, when I have something kind of complex in the output, and I want to go back to see how did I do that, it's like, okay, I don't understand what I did here. But if I go to plot it, it will take like, I don't know, maybe a few days. But then I will
Wow.
see like the plotter
Yeah,
drawing.
cool.
And I will say, okay, if I stay here, I would see like what's, step by step,
Hmm.
the philosophy behind the code. So the
Hmm.
plotter also helps me a lot to understand, what I've done.
Like
So
like it breaks it down. It shows you. That's wild. Like it must, like, do you often feel that you're interacting with something else at all, or that when you set something like that in process and it's just over there working for days, or like a generative code is just unveiling itself? Like, is there any sort of like godlike feeling to that? You know what I mean? Like any sort of like just I can, it just sounds like a real creationist feeling, I guess, watching that plotter create something that you don't quite understand. Like there's a mystery
sometimes
unfolding in the corner.
it's for me it helps a lot, all this space that we are now here, everything goes super fast. And I think we should really try to understand this space, because it's super, everything is so quick. And for me, it's super easy to create a lot of outputs in half an hour, because I have my
Hmm.
system and I can create a lot. And that's fascinating, because that it's very intense. But then that's why I need sometimes to spend a few days, weeks, or months, if I have a project with the plotter, to spend there some time, because you just go out from this speed, because you have to need the plotter to be done. And also you break the paper, you break the pen, and you have to change it. So the pace is completely different. So I think there is something also interesting in this kind of constantly change between the purely digital activity. It's not just the work, it's your way to interact with your work. It's immediate. And the plotter is something that takes a lot of time, and you touch it, so it's, for me, it's necessary to work with both, to have some equilibrium.
I understand that completely. I want to actually touch back on something that you were bringing up quite a bit just a little bit ago about distance. You used the word distance a lot, and I got the impression that you were using it a little different than what might be understood or whatever. But when you talk about distance in that way, like the distance between you and, well, I'm just going to let you talk about it, I guess. But do you know what I'm talking about, where you were talking about the distance between you and these things and why things are drawn closer to you? Could you just maybe explain that idea of distance a little bit?
Yes. So yeah, as I mentioned in the beginning, when you work with not AI, but just machine learning techniques, it's you can use it for many purposes. You can use it for applications, not just going a bit out from the world of the art itself, but just how we use these kind of techniques today in society. We can use it to recommend you something. You can use it to classify a lot of data. We can use it to yeah, actually everything for me, it's about recommending some result. Okay, so to do that, you have many ways to do it. You can do it in a very simple way, just classifying something very big in data, but you have a computer, so you can go and do it quickly. But you can use different algorithms. So if you use, for example, deep learning techniques, this is for me the core, because at the end, this is what we do in art with the GANs and with neural networks. So very in short, everything is about to find new dimensions, new spaces where things interact in a very particular way. To be understood that, I mean, let's think about ourselves as a multi-dimensional being. We know how to think about 3 dimensions because the world is 3-dimensional, but maybe we can think about ourselves like a super multi-dimensional being. That means I have my dimension of emotions. I have my dimension of what makes me sad, what makes me happy, my dimension of people who I love, people who I hate, my dimension of memories, places I feel good or I feel bad. So in terms of getting deep to who we are, I think these kind of distances are the thing that we have to get in. So the magic happens when you realize that all these dimensions, every point in there happens in one instant of time. I mean, if you put like in a super, this is a very complicated
I love it.
but I mean, if you think about a huge sphere, for example, that you are this sphere, okay? So you are in the middle and you have inside of this book that you like, then a bit far, another book that you like, but not so much. Another person in the middle of that. I don't know, your family somewhere here, your dog, Paris, because it's a city that it's super important for you. It's close to you. So all these things are inside different dimensions, because a person it's not the same as a city for you, but everything is located somewhere around you. So this is what I mean when I say this is all about distances. And this is what I'm trying to do in the projects that I explained you before. I wanted to find my distance between the Balkans and the Mediterranean culture, where I am closer to, but this is a very complicated topic for me because I'm so biased. And that's why in art, I think, can we just translate this way of thinking, not using deep learning techniques, not being, not doing it in an accurate way, but in a poetic way? Can we use this kind of understanding of the relationships in our work? I mean, what's the distance between my bird and a real bird? This is something that really interests me. Or what's the distance between something that it's an illusion of a sea when I create some moire or something with a real sea? So when I find these distances, it's something that I think just it doesn't help me because I cannot use this information because it's super complicated for me. But I mean, it's something that just guides me, you know. It's there is something there. I'm not sure what it is, but yeah, distance is something super important for me.
It's really interesting. Could you maybe, when you said closer to, you said I'm closer to Bulgaria, was that right?
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean now? Like what, like fit the geography, like geography wise you're closer to, or like in your heart you're closer to, in your brain you're closer to, in your personality you're closer to? When you say closer to, what do you mean?
This new distance that we created with technology, or just the technology created for us, it's not a physical distance, and that's something that it's very complicated for us to think. Because it's not if I am more close to Italy or France, so I will be closer to Bulgaria. No. It's this way of thinking of closer in these terms. It's about something that it's closer to you in terms of preferences or something that you like. Or
okay,
so
yeah.
I'm not sure if it's the brain or the heart, or maybe it's the soul. I don't know. It's something that you just like this, or you are from there, or you know, when you go to I don't know, some city that you're not from there, but you feel at home. You know, there is something that connects. So at the end, it's about distances and connections. So I'm not sure what it is exactly, but this kind of similarity between you and something, it's a new distance for me.
So this is something beyond preference, beyond taste.
Yes, it's something that I'm not sure what it is, but it's something that connects you to something. So now we're building very simple tools. I recommend you this book because you like the other ones, or you buy in Amazon something because you bought something before. That's cool, but it's quite, you know, it's quite simple.
It just clicked for me when you said it just clicked. I got it.
Yes, but I mean, that's cool because it's something that helps us in the daily lives.
Yeah.
But if we take this and we put it in something more deep, I think we can work in this direction to really understand, I don't know, who is the closest person to you in Earth, you know? And or
that's crazy. They took out that far is crazy. Um, yeah, to find the, like, who's the closest person on Earth would be nuts. But like the example of giving of like how Amazon uses that now, but like if we could just do that recommended preferences that's on this crazy big scale of just like, you're closer to this because of this, and maybe
Yes.
you will love this. Like it's going to be the best thing for you or whatever. That's super interesting. It's something I haven't really thought about before. That's using technology to find our own preferences, I guess. I've actually went away from that, especially with music, where it was like, Spotify was recommending music to me, and I got kind of like hooked on this, always going with what they were showing me and trying to going down these rabbit holes that they provided. And I found it took away the agency of me and my connection to the music, which was just interesting. I felt like in that case, the algorithm got completely in the way and like ruined music for me.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's super interesting. I wrote it all down. I was even making a little graph of when you were talking.
Well, I did a whole project. I spent 1 year working on a project trying to express this idea, and I can share with you after that.
I would love that.
Video and things. So yeah, it's something that for me it's super interesting. But just getting, connecting it to the art now, I think, because it's something that the idea is from science, from data science maybe, or technology. But I just think if we think of this concept of distance in this big way, we cannot go through accurate science, because it's not everything is accurate in this thinking. But if you just take this idea and you go to art and you just explore without any constraints, any formal connotations that you have to be, on taking care of, I have to do this because this is the proper way. But if you go to art with this idea, you can find, I think, new answers. Or if you don't find anything, it's fine, because you're just trying to express yourself. So that's why I think art it's something that, taking a few notions of how these models work, try to expand that with the freedom that art gives you at the end.
Speaking of your art definitely resonates different than most generative artists that I've seen, at least. It's very delicate, but not like overly delicate where it's like fragile, really, I wouldn't say. But there's clearly preference by the artist going into generative art, and I still don't quite understand how those preferences are expressed, if I'm being honest, so I guess, could you talk a little bit about those preferences of yours, or maybe why your art tends to look, like your art does? You could tell a point line piece, I think, pretty easily. You have there's a grace to the work, of a simplicity along with complexity that are balancing just perfectly. And there's a lot of detail, a lot of fine lines. I see a lot of decisions being made when I see your other work, and even just how you present yourself online. It all coalesces, it coincides. Like I see your personality within your generative work still. Could you talk a little bit about that?
So what's the question exactly?
Just how where do your decisions come from? Where like, why does your work look the way it does? When it comes to generative work, a lot of it can look similar, but yours doesn't. Even the palettes you've chosen are more of this naturalistic, I would say, or natural tones and stuff like that. Like, I would like to hear maybe about the decisions that you do make, or the personality that you do bring to it.
Well, I don't know. I've sometimes, if someone asks me about the color, the use of color, for example, I don't have any toolkit or something that I use, my palettes or something. I always, it comes from, I usually start with very black and white drawings. It's something that I just try to explore, or I can take two directions. One is I have a clear idea, and then I go to execute that idea. Or I just, as I mentioned before, I start playing with something and I destroy it and I obtain something, and I said, okay, this is something interesting. So I start polishing this first idea, and it becomes like a loop. And then at the end, I obtain some kind of story. And then when I create that story, color affects a lot to the final message, because depending on the colors that you use, because sometimes my work is quite abstract, and the color actually gives the narrative to the story itself, because the color, the combination. But because I use this kind of very thin lines and transparencies and things, the color becomes something very organic in the process, because it's not that I mix 3 colors, because those colors would be the 3 colors at the end. I mix these colors, and then, when I use transparencies and things, it becomes like a very different palette. But the palette emerged from this combination of different overlaps. So this is like the process with the color. But at the end, the approach is also always 2 directions. Or I have a story and I want to tell that, or I just destroy something and I obtain something. But at the end, there is something that always moves everything that I release, because I share a lot of experiments in Twitter, but I don't release everything that I share. If I release something, I really need to create a story around. And I for example, I love one-on-ones more than long form projects, because you can work a lot on a concrete piece, and then the combination of 5 pieces or 10 pieces create a whole story. Maybe you can create the beginning of that story with one of the pieces, and you can go through all the pieces until you get the last piece of the collection, and you have something that you express with each one. So it depends a lot of the work.
Wow, I'm looking at a lot of it right now as you were talking, and I love Broccoli Nightmare. Just cracks me up. That's a really funny piece. The name, but your work is just gorgeous. And the palette, yeah, the palette's so great. So I want to actually jump to something else, though, is that your photography really stood out to me. And if somebody looks at your photography after seeing your generative work and everything, it all coincides and is so cohesive. You saying like it's just an emergent, these color palettes and everything like that. Yeah, I hear you 100%. I believe you, all that. But then you look at your photographs and it's like the same soft, kind of washed out palettes and stuff. And it's like, come on, like you're not even giving yourself enough credit, like for what you're bringing to your own work, in my opinion. But your photographs are gorgeous. These film photographs, especially this like glare off the ceiling one, I had actually saved it. These are gorgeous. Like your grain, the dust and everything. Would you mind talking a little bit about your photography or your video work even? Because it's gorgeous. I love it.
So the photography, I think in the website, I only have, film photography, but I have, quite a lot of digital photography also. But this period of time that I started developing roles at home was something very important for me, actually, because it's something that unlocked my way of working now, actually, because I've been doing photography for my whole life, because it's something that I really like. I got my first camera when I was a little kid. So, but I've been trying to do my own work for a long time. But then I decided that I had, a great eye, but I didn't have like the formal knowledge of how works photography, and how to deal with manually everything and so on. So I started learning that, and I realized that I wasn't able to understand how the camera works. It was a mess for me. If I open and I have more light or less light, it was a mess. So I
really
said, yes.
I find that so hard to believe. You were like a data visualization.
Yes, I know, but I have some kind of.
You write code. A camera was too much for you?
Yes, but I mean, in a deep way. Okay, so I understood, how to deal with the camera, but I really needed to understand deeply how the light works in the camera, how it turns, at the end of the camera, and the philosophy behind the camera. So I said, okay, I cannot go anymore with a digital camera, because I think I understand the process, but I don't. So I bought an analog camera, and I said, okay, first of all, every shot would cost me like €1 or €2. So that's something that I have to think more about how I should. And then also taking the role, developing at home, taking the whole process, opening the camera, seeing the light, actually playing, putting the phone on the camera and taking a picture with the objective from the camera, everything. I played like for a year with this concept.
Wow.
And I truly understood how a camera works at that time. So this process is something that now I use with the plotter. I spend more time understanding my code with this. So I think it's super interesting for me. So the analog photography, that's why in the website I show this work without any explanation, but it's something super interesting for me in my professional journey that year with the photography. But I think it's more important or relevant for me, my digital photography, because it's something that I did for a long time. And then also the film work that you can find in the website, it's something super just for fun for me, because I use, music from, from Spotify or whatever, YouTube. It's nothing that it's meant to be sold, but my purpose in life, let's say, is to do at some point a movie. And that's the reason why I truly enjoy when I find some situations in real life. I don't know, you're taking a wine and you just listen to the conversation of someone next to you and you just record that moment in time and you add some music that in my head just work. So you can spend like 1 minute looking at something that has no meaning, but with the music and everything create something. And I enjoy so much doing that. And I call that trailer of trailer. When you see a trailer of the movie, it's because it's before a story, but I don't have any story, just like this small piece of something at some point, and I even traveled for that, when I listen to music that it's like completely resonates with me. I say, okay, I need to do that with a car in a very small town in, I don't know, in Italy. So I took a friend of mine to go there to just record that just for the joy of doing that, and I really enjoy this kind of thing. So photography and films and these things are something that I used to do for a long time. Now I'm focused on my activity, but yeah, I miss it. And it's an important part of me.
Is it something you'll go back to, or something that you'll explore further, or like? So, have you minted any? Have you minted any of your photographs or anything?
No.
Is there anywhere we can see the digital photographs? You said they're more relevant, but you don't have them on your website.
I think I have a few on Instagram.
Oh, you do? Oh,
yeah,
on Instagram. Okay.
I have some, but well, I never share that material actually, because it's something that I don't consider myself that it's something, nobody never asked me about this in any kind of interview of this kind. So it's not my activity, or I feel, I'm not a photographer and everyone is doing maybe better photos than me. I don't know. It's nothing that I just do it for fun,
Yeah, I hear you, but I'm laughing because I bet if we saw your digital photographs, it'd blow everybody out of the water and it'd be amazing, and then we'd just laugh at that, and to say you're not a photographer, and after I looked at, yeah, you are, like you're enough of a photographer, as much of a photographer as anybody. It's crazy that you were developing these at your place. So you set up a little dark room, you got all the chemicals, and you just went at it.
Yeah.
Wow. I had to go through that process when I was in college. I took photography and we learned that, whole process, and I hated it. I love taking photos, but that process, I was just like, fuck this. I mean, it was cool. Like I liked what you were able to do with that process to the photos, in post, but it was so laborious, and like the setup and the breakdown, and like I was like, I just want to make shit. Like I feel like I'm setting up, more than I'm, the process of setting up and tearing down, getting ready and all this and that was more than I spent actually working. So I was like, fuck that. But I admire.
Yeah, it's quite, yeah. Sometimes it's not the best thing, but yeah, I enjoy that process for that time.
I
just
admire it.
But now I'm not doing that anymore, and actually I'm looking now at all my cameras, and all are broken. I don't know what happened last year. So we broke everything. So I'm like, okay, I need a new camera. And I have a small shop here next to my place in Madrid where they sell old cameras. It's something that I am lucky enough to have the shop here right now, right here. And yeah, sometimes it's like if I really need something, I go and they have something super cheap, just like for free almost. And I take the camera, I do some experiments, and then if I have the time, I develop that at home. If not, I just go there and they develop it for me. But
so you still develop at home? You still have all that stuff and still do that? That's cool.
Yeah.
I admire that quite a bit. I have a friend who does that too. So as far as inspiration goes, what has led you to where you're at as far as your interests? We've kind of covered, natural processes and stuff like that. But as far as inspiration throughout your life, I would love to hear just like what were some of your guiding lights as you grew up, I guess, and became interested in various arts and crafts and stuff like that. Just like what interests you that led you to where you're at now?
I think the process itself of being able to create things, it's something that just triggered me since the beginning. It's something that for me, my activity, I was talking with the vertical crypto vertical people like 3 days ago, and we were talking about this, and we were talking about this life work balance, which it's something that I don't have. I don't have a balance there, but it's good, for me. I don't know if it's for the good or for the bad. Always my activity has been a very central part of myself. I share my activity with my partner, so my day, it's about what can we do, have you seen that, so we can see this movie, or we can do that, or we can collaborate in this way, or it's something that I just love what I do. And I think the thing that just inspires me to get more and more in this direction is, first of all, that's something that happened from the beginning in my case, but now actually realizing that my 24 hours, or just let some hours to sleep, but I have the freedom to do what I want to do. It's something that just allows me to go crazy with this. For me, it's the creation itself. I have some super strong attachment to beauty. I really need beauty in everything. Arranging the table for dinner. It has to be beautiful. The light has to be beautiful. Everything has to be beautiful in my opinion. Which is actually beautiful always. So everything has to be just good. I enjoy now seeing the light entering in my place. So it's the need of beauty, and if you can work in this direction, that's magical for me. So it's not about work. It's not about work understood as money. It's about being there, surrounded by these things, and also just recovering a bit how we started the conversation, because it's something very important for me. Again, in my life, I really believe there is something, at the end, and there is something that we are now working on understanding. Not now, because we are working on generative art. I mean, for the last thousands and millions of years, we're working on where are we and who we are. So it's like, I feel there is this like a video game, we are going step by step, inventing, the wheel, then the fire, then with jokes apart, inventing Twitter to connect everyone together, and then this new technology, the planes, the trains to connect us. So there is something that we're just getting closer to. We went to the moon, so we are getting closer to understand what is all this about. So there is something that if the beauty itself or art can just bring us closer to this understanding. It's so if all of us, we can be like a little piece of this exploration, it's something that it's important for me. So I think we are all part of this.
I love that. Like we're all little nodes in this big generative code or something like that. Like unveiling ourselves. What was your home life like as a child? Like that was a beautiful answer, absolutely. But I would like to know, like, was this something that was always instilled in you as a young adult or even as a child? Were you kind of fascinated by the world around you and this idea of like, why are we here? What is all this? And this idea of beauty, the way that you talked about the light entering your place. I totally understand these kind of things. And honestly, looking at your work, it makes sense too that you would be, it's almost like viewing the world somewhat romantically, wouldn't you say? Like you have a pretty romantic lens. Your work, it looks very, romantic to me as well. So were you brought up in that kind of environment, or
I
maybe
think
were your parents like what did they do, or could you talk a little bit maybe just in general about that?
I think so. I grew up as a single child. Is in English, like I didn't
Yeah,
have
sure.
any
Yeah, an only
sisters.
child.
And yeah, there is something, in my case at least, when you are the only child in the family, you become like a tree. You're not like kids and parents, but you're just a union of three. So I was always involved in the conversations with them, with their friends. I was like not like a kid exactly. It was like the third one. He's coming or she's coming. So I don't know if I think that was something important for me because, I got so much in these conversations, and my parents were, both are economists, but my father was like a more, the activity was more deep in him. So we used to talk a lot since I was a kid about economics, about, um, actually how the world works, in his thoughts about, economics, or
Wow.
we used to talk a lot about economics in terms of the situation of our family. We were immigrants in Spain, so he was so much aware of, what was the history of Bulgaria, how was the situation in Spain, and how was the fall of the communism, and what will happen in the country in 20 years. Or so these kind of conversations were always around, understanding what was going on with us in our context or something. So I think
Distances. Right, like the distance of all these things.
Yes, actually. And also, I was so free of creating my things. I was talking with a friend about this recently, because we were talking about some kid that he wanted something on the room, and the parents were like, no, we're not gonna do this. And I was like, okay. When I was a kid, it was I was in the first flat we lived in. It was super ugly, my room, and I said, okay, just let me do something, and I remember I painted awfully all the room in some purple, some color that I hate, but it was the thing that I just mixed with things, so it was like purple, and then I put some carpet so it was horrible, but I designed it by myself. So, and they were like, if it's a disaster, it's your disaster, just take care of yourself. So this freedom and these kind of conversations, and they were kind of interested in culture and art. So we traveled a lot when I was a kid. And I think all these things, I don't know, fed this kind of interest in what's around, and maybe these constant trips, we traveled a lot by car. And I don't know, that helped me. Actually, it was like the same as the camera, because I remember that traveling helped me a lot to understand better geography. And I remember every city, every capital, every river, everything. But if I had to read it on the book for the school, for an exam or something, I would forget that, because it's like, I don't know, the city, you know. But if I went with the car, I would remember that city. So I don't know. It was everything together. But I never thought about if my childhood affects me today. But of course it does. But I think these three things could explain
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. It absolutely does. Especially, well, not especially, but it stands out to me that as a child, you were exposed to like the conversations of adults about like economics and things like that. I don't know what age you must have been, but like, wow, how beneficial. I wish, I wish I
Sometimes
could have had
boring.
that. I mean, yeah, it's boring as shit, but I mean that's wild, and it's really cool, and I love how you compare traveling by car to the camera as well, like this kind of needing to get right up in there and like dig right in to understand, see those gears yourself almost, or like see
Mhm.
those working parts, see the country, see the state, see the whatever. It all makes a lot of sense. Could you talk maybe, I have to ask this because I always ask, but music is a big part of my life. So I always like to ask other artists about their musical preferences and tastes, especially when creating. Do you listen to music when you're creating? If so, what is
Yes.
it? Or do you have a separate musical taste outside of it? Or let's talk about music a little bit.
Music is it's something super important for me, but since always. And I realized that I was listening to music all the time. Like when when Spotify takes these statistics or something, I always like have way more hours of listening than my friends. But I realized for the last year or year and a half, I did not listen to music. I don't know what's happening. I think I don't know if it's because of this pace that is so intense. I don't know, but it's like I have a lot of inputs already. So when I work now, I cannot work with music actually for last year. It's like I really need some pieces of music when I create some piece, and I need to connect it like with the videos. I need to connect it with some
Hmm.
song. I can listen that in a loop, But to work with music, it's something that it's complicated for me this past year. I'm not sure what's going on, but I hope it's something temporary, but it's happening. Yeah. But in general, I really need music all the time. So my preferences, I think, change a lot over the time. It depends on, um, I usually prefer sad music, this kind of super depressive music. It's something that for me, it's super great.
What is sad, depressing music to you?
Um, I don't know, many things. You mean concrete singers or bands or something, or
Yeah,
type of
anything.
music?
Yeah, I just
Because I have like a lot of bands, but I mean this kind of very sad indie music.
indie music. Okay.
Yeah, this kind
Well,
of
because
very.
I didn't know if you were talking maybe, violin music could be very sad, but there's also, like emo with it is sad, but those are
No,
very
no,
different things.
no. Usually indie, some indie music or electronic, but very minimal. There are
Okay.
some
Like
very minimal
ambient.
composers. Yeah, and yeah, it depends. But this very sad music, there is something that has to have the song to be one of my favorite songs, and if that happens, I can listen it for a year with nonstop. It's I love in the music when you have the music, and then at some point it becomes like epic, but epic not like in a epic movie, but something is going there, and
Hmm.
then it goes out.
Hmm.
So even if people say like this is so sad, it's not sad, so it inspires me a lot, so I can listen that, and I imagine some project that I will do, or something that I will record, or so. Yeah, that kind of music. But it's something interesting when I work on coding. I listen this music, but if I plot, I need something very happy, let's say.
Hmm.
And I used to plot a lot with Elton John.
Hmm.
I love him to plot, And all this 80s music or 70s, this yeah, there are like happy music at that decade. So I love plotting with this music and so. But if I have to work on my digital work, usually I'm listening something very depressing.
Very depressing. And you said you're in a period where you're not really listening to a lot. So do you sit in, well, relative silence or just kind of the ambient noises of your studio surroundings, or do you have like a TV on, or do you listen to a podcast, or is it just what, is there any audio stimulation whatsoever?
No. Well, I don't have TV at home, but no, I used to go in my terrace and I just sit there with a coffee and
Nice.
work there. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just like kind of need silence now. I think.
Sometimes I really like that too. I mean, silence
Yeah,
isn't really silence. There's still a lot going on
yeah,
usually, so I find it quite inspiring in its own right. I've gone through phases where, 6 months, a year almost, where I wasn't listening to much music, but it always came back. It's like I listen to a lot of music right now again, but it always did come back. But I would lose it for a while, but then at those times, it would be like listening to the construction that's like a mile away or something. Like you start realizing like how much sound there really is, at any moment, and like how, like what you can actually hear if you listen. Like you think you just hear a white noise, but if you really, you can pinpoint even far, like even in distances where they are, almost like an infographic,
yeah,
like so. And I found it interesting too how you brought up the Spotify, how they give you infographics now at the end of the year to show you like, look at, here's all your listening traits and everything like that, which is interesting. But so I guess really, I would just like to hear now about what you're working on presently, what you're most excited about, what projects you have going on. Just like, is there anything you want to promote? Anything in particular you want to talk about? Do you have a show coming up? Anything like that? Like where is your work focused right now? Where is your mind? What is coming up?
well, now I'm working on 4 projects for future exhibitions
Okay.
and for the end of the year, which is quite intense. And
Yeah,
I hope,
we're 3/4 of the year in almost.
yes, but I really hope next year I will be able to, to take like, I don't know, more time for each. But this is like how things are going now. So I'm thankful for being able to do all these things. So yeah, now I'm kind of enjoying the exhibition in London with the unit people, which
Okay.
I'm going tomorrow in London to visit them.
Okay, so do
And
not, sorry to interrupt, but you're part of a show at Unit right now in London. Did that
yes,
open already, or does it open soon?
they opened last week. I
Okay,
think last week, and it will last until October.
awesome.
And it's so exciting. In our code is the name of the exhibition.
Okay, so
And
it's all generative?
yes,
Right on. I
it's
was at Unit a couple months ago. Beautiful gallery.
yes,
Very
yeah,
beautiful. I've been familiar with them for a long time, but I finally got to meet the owner, and he was awesome as well. It was a really great place. So congratulations. That's really cool. If anybody's in London, go check that show out for sure at
yeah.
Unit
It's
London.
super cool, and I'm super happy with the work there, and the people there. It's like Tyler Hobbs, Zach Lieberman, Casey Reyes, so Elena Sarin, Sofia Crespo. So
You're
it's
in
like
a company of giants.
huge company there. So yeah, that's, I think I'm working on projects, but I really try to enjoy the current things. So now there is an
Yeah.
exhibition, so I think this is also part of my time, enjoy the exhibition. So that's one thing. And then 2 more things, like it's not a big project, but curating a few pieces for next exhibitions. Also, Bright Moments in Mexico, I'll be there, and
Hmm.
that's a huge thing for me. It's like it's taking a lot of time, which is perfect because this is like the way I think I enjoy most working. But yeah, I don't have anything yet to tell about this, but it's something that really excites me because I'm trying to create a story around this in a new way for me. And yeah, so it's like, for me, it's, I will see if I will be able to achieve that first mission. But I'm trying to work more in how to tell a story with a long form more than the project itself, which I think I already have it. But I don't know. We'll see. But it's something that for me it's special working on that. And
when is that Bright Moments Mexico? Is that December or October? November, the 1 month I didn't say. Right on, cool. That is awesome. I've heard a lot about that actually. Even back when I was in London a few months ago, people were already talking about that. So very cool.
It's gonna be fun, yeah. And I think many people is going there, and the exhibition would be amazing. They're preparing something very big there, and
they do beautiful things. They actually Seth gave me a mint pass for a crypto Berliner, and I got to go to Bright Moments in London and go through that whole process, which was kind of bonkers. They sat you down and gave you a little thing to unlock and all this.
The piano.
It was like a whole thing. It was quite bespoke. But they do beautiful things. So congratulations on that. Definitely, if anybody's in Mexico City, is it? Mexico City? Mexico City in November, right on. What else?
And well, another one which it's about to be announced. So yeah, for the end of the year, another one which is a collaboration, and working on a project which we're trying to mix digital with physical there.
Okay.
And the idea is working a bit about this concept around what happened, when you release a long form project, and actually, what happened with all these pieces that are never gonna be minted, So at the end, you build a whole system, and then you mint 1,000 pieces because you decide to stop at 1,000, but then the system can run again in an infinite way, but you cannot use that anymore because you decided to stop it at 1,000. So reflect a bit about this concept with physical tools to compare it with physical similar things in our lives. So yeah.
Such as compared to physical things in our life, like
playing with physical devices, how they work and how they last over time or not, and how the information loses quality over time because it's not stored somewhere in the blockchain. Air and physical conditions affect to these devices. So this kind of reflection. And it's something super beautiful for me. So this is like the thing which I will end the year. So it's super refreshing having this in the roadmap. And
roadmap in quotes for anybody listening that can't see it. We did the air quotes. Where do you all mint? Like, are you Tez specific, or do you mint on ETH too?
Yes, I had something on ETH. I am mostly Tez. From the beginning, I just began everything on Hiket Nung at the time, and I just felt part of the community, and I felt, in the beginning was it was so strong, that community. So it felt like if you were there, you just had to decide. So, and I don't know if I was right or not, but it felt like that at that time. So I just felt, okay, so here I am more similar to that people. There were like amazing artists who I was following for years, and they were not in Ethereum. They were not in Tezos, in Hiket Nung. So for me, it was like, what I need in the other side, right?
Yeah.
And it was, all this kind of environment thing around. So I just stood in Tezos because I felt it was like better. And also there was this kind of, feeling of, okay, so the money is there in Ethereum, and here we have to fight a bit to have a place. And that was something appealing to me, like we have to fight a bit to have some space here. But that was in the beginning because, we were kind of crazy kids there. But now I really understood, you have to be agnostic with everything, and just, I am more Tezos, but I'm not against anything else. So I meant it in foundation, and I know at some point, if I have time, I would like to apply to our blogs, because I never did that. So I'm not against anything. I'm just more present because I just I grew up there, So
it's so funny that you said we were just little kids or young kids. That was what, a year ago? But are you on FX Hash? Have you done things on FX Hash? Apologies for not just knowing that off the top, but it's a lot to keep track of, honestly, all these different platforms. But I have to go look. So you're on Hikagnon, Object, FX Hash, all that.
Yes, I just did one project in FX Hash.
Just one so far? Cool. It's something I'm super interested in. I really want to get into generative art. And so I think to close this whole conversation, my question to you is going to be like the same one I've asked a couple other people, but for anybody that is interested into getting into generative art, or maybe feels daunted by generative art in general, because to me, it's a very daunting thing. But then I've talked with generative artists who are like, it's, you can learn rudimentary coding, or not coding, but generative art, I think someone actually said like 3 hours. I think Stephen Contiero told me, he's like, you can learn it easier than Photoshop or something like that with his comparison. So in your opinion and your perspective, what advice would you give to somebody trying to get into generative art? And yeah, I guess, where would you start? How would you begin?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I can give any advice, but
well, let me ask you that. Maybe the question is it, as Stephen Contiero said, like simple to get into? I mean, I'm sure it's as complicated as anything is if you want to get that complicated with it. But if you really wanted to, could you pick up generative art pretty quickly and like produce some relatively interesting things?
Yes, I think the most simple way to get there is just go and take some tutorials of the most common libraries, like P5 or processing, and just start playing with the tutorials. Like,
what did you say? P5?
P5.js, JS. I always say that in Spanish.
Okay.
P5 and processing, which it's kind of the same, but adapted for web. And I think just this, and also read The Nature of Code, which is a book that, is like the Bible for everyone who gets in the space. And actually, I would say first read the book, then go to the tools and try playing with, just following the tutorials, downloading the tutorials, trying to replicate the tutorial, and then break the tutorial, and then try to change, shapes and colors and things. And you'll get addicted to that. So once you're there, I would say once you really spend some time with these tools and just feeling, what you can do with that, I would say do a step back and really understand what it is this about and what can you do with that, because it's super easy, I think, to begin with this. Get involved in all the rush of people doing things and everyone creating, and so you would start trying to follow trends, I think, which is fine, but I wouldn't advise that to just go there and try to do what people is doing. Just take a step back and say, okay, first of all, I really need to understand that this is the way how I approach things. So really understand what is this about. Maybe just get involved more in different art, not just generative art, but how people express. What can you do with that? And most importantly, why generative art? You can paint, you can do whatever. So why this? Because it can bring different things to the table. So I would say that just very simple, take it easy, go to tutorials. You have a lot of things in internet to learn from, and talk with interesting people, maybe.
like yourself. I'm doing that right now. The nature of code sounds great. I can't remember if anybody else has brought that up or not, but the name itself is even interesting. The nature of code. You could reverse that, the code of nature, kind of almost. And I kind of want to end on that because this is kind of what I've tried to dig into with other generative artists, like which one is it, or like which way does it work, or I don't even know how to frame that, but all generative art to me seems to be speaking towards some sort of, or trying to figure out some sort of generative code behind nature in general, right? Doesn't it almost, it seems to, and it makes me wonder, is there a code behind nature, or are we just overlaying something that we made up and can understand onto something that has no structure? And we're just kind of like hitting on points of chaos that we can understand. Because it feels like a generative artist wants us to believe that a generative code underlies all of everything. All of existence has a generative code that supports it. But fundamentally, there's nothing actually that supports that or says that, you know, there is numbers and mathematics that rule or govern any of this stuff. We try to put laws on it. They call it science or whatever, but you know, science in many ways to me is just magic. You know, it's just magic that we defined. You know, and you know, it's like, what's the difference? Like, I don't give a shit. But anyways, I'm gonna pose that question to you in closing. Do you believe, you know, that there's code behind everything, or is generative art and in code and in just this, like algorithms, all these things, are they just kind of our pale attempt at representing the truth of nature, when in actuality it's very pale and it's very much just like our impression, not reality? What do you believe?
Oh, that's an easy question to close that conversation. But, well, I don't know. But, well, this is, I think, connecting with the first thing, that how we started the conversation.
Absolutely.
I would say, first of all, I don't know. But if I have to say something, I don't think there is a generative code under, life, or a code. I don't think we are a computer or something designed by a huge machine. But I really think there is a, maybe small, but a chance to really think that there is something that we need to understand, to read. There is something that maybe nature is. I like to say that maybe technology, it's nature talking to us, because we have to have this conversation with something bigger than us. And nature, for me, it's everything, right? So nature understood like everything. So I'm not sure if there is a code behind, but if code can help us to establish this conversation with technology, understanding that this is nature talking to us, or translating technology, what can nature tell us, I think this is something that, it's not that I maybe believe. There is no way, it's not like that. So of course there is something there, but it's not like, yeah, life is JavaScript. I don't think so. But I'm sure there is something like, while you were talking, I was thinking about finding some metaphor to explain how I see that. But fire itself, when we found what is fire, it was not, okay, we found fire, so now we're going to burn everything because we have fire. No, fire is like, we found that to light ourselves, to feed ourselves, to protect ourselves, and to to get to the next step, thanks to the fire. But the fire itself was nothing. So same thing is with the code. I think that's a conversation that would take hours for me, but I think when you see in perspective things, it's like very natural to think, okay, now we have code and now we have these machines. if you see the evolution of everything, if you see how, you know, people from the beginning with the fire, and then I don't know, the industrial revolution, which were like the preferences of the people there, or the society, you know, working 20 hours per day, living in small boxes, and, you know, everything, the pollution and everything. So that was something that we go over, that we just moved forward, and now we are at some place that we just, you know, we survived to all this, and now we are facing some security, well, in some parts of the world, you know, so talking always in from one side, but I mean, now we have the technology, and now we can go deeper in this, because, you know, because of internet, because of the social media, because, you know, so there is something that makes a click. I cannot explain it better, but because it will take more time. But the only thing that I'm trying to get here is that it's not based on code, but code, it's something that it's for sure unlocking something. And so I know.
Unlocking something for sure. And I think what you said about this could be nature speaking to us in a way is the most eloquent way of putting it that I've heard yet. That makes sense to me in a weird way of what this is, where it's not, you know, us putting something onto something else or trying to find something that already existed. It's almost as if creating a language for which nature is able to speak to us or something. It's like this new language. We didn't have this language before, and it was created, which is bridging a gap that we can now communicate maybe. And I think that is such a wild idea that would probably haunt me now for a while of thinking
Sorry.
about and playing. And playing with that in my own mind. I think that's absolutely gorgeous. Is there anything else that you'd like to add on? Or I think that was a beautiful way to end this. That alone, I'm going to process for a while. Like I said, that was a very eloquent, beautiful answer. I appreciate that very much. Is there anything you'd like to add, though?
Well, I think we covered a lot of things. I have to thank you, because I think this is one of the most. I think what time is it? Yeah, 1
We're
hour.
almost an hour and a half.
Yeah, I think we covered like more than usual a lot of things. You asked me for things that I very appreciate, like about the photography, for example.
I was gonna say in closing, everybody go look at Iskra's photography and start hassling her to mint that shit, because I'll pick some of that up or whatever. But
I
your
appreciate
photography
it.
is gorgeous and it all ties together. I was so excited that you agreed to do an interview with us, especially after I started really looking into your work, because I was really only familiar with the generative work. And then when I started to dig in, I, you know, discovered an entire world, and you're very cohesive throughout all your practices. The world is very fleshed out and beautiful, and it was really fun to explore. And I can't thank you enough for spending some time and explaining the deeper thought behind some of these things. I think as far as generative art goes, you're definitely top of class in my opinion.
Thank you very much. I really
Absolutely.
appreciate this time. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great one. Cheers.
Bye.